Joanne Rowling, best known as J.K. Rowling, was born on July 31, 1965, in Yate, England, northeast of Bristol. Her parents were Peter James Rowling and Anne Rowling, and her sister, Diane, was born when Rowling was 2 years old. The family moved to the nearby village Winterbourne when Rowling was 4. She attended St. Michael's Primary School, and her headmaster, Alfred Dunn, has been suggested as the inspiration for the Harry Potter headmaster Albus Dumbledore. At the age of 9, Rowling moved to Church Cottage in the Gloucestershire village of Tutshill, close to Chepstow, in Wales. She attended secondary school at Wylding School and College. Rowling's childhood and teenager years were not so easy, as she stated in an interview in 1999.
I have no nostalgia whatsoever for childhood. I wouldn't go back if you paid me, ever.
You were an unhappy child.
No, I don't think I was an unhappy child. I wouldn't look back and say I was an unhappy child, but there were times when I was unhappy. I think that the point I'm making is that I can remember how unhappy I was, unlike many adults who will look back and will have been just as unhappy as I was, but will go, oh, it was a golden time. It was a golden time.
She had a difficult home life. Her mother was ill, and she had a difficult relationship with her father.
I was very frightened of my father for a very long time, but also tried, well, it's a common combination, isn't it? I also tried desperately to get his approval and make him happy, I suppose. And then there came a point, quite shamingly late in life, where I couldn't do that anymore. And so I haven't had any contact with my father now for a few years.
Rowling was a bookish and bossy child. Harry Potter character's Hermione is based on her.
When I started to write Hermione, when I actually got hold of a pen, she came incredibly easily, largely because she's me.
Go on. Wingardium Leviosa. Wingardium Leviosa.
I was swotty, and I had that, sense of insecurity underneath, trying to compensate for that by getting everything right all the time. And like Hermione, I projected a false confidence, which I know was very irritating to people at times, but underneath it all, I felt completely and utterly inadequate, which is why I completely understand Hermione.
J.K. Rowling knew that she wanted to be a writer from an early age. As a child, she often wrote fantasy stories, which she would usually then read to her sister Diane. She wrote her first book as just 6 years old about a rabbit.
The first finished book I did was a book called Rabbit, about a rabbit called Rabbit, thereby revealing the imaginative approach to names that has stood me in such good stead ever since. And I wrote the rabbit stories for ages, to the point where a series of books about Rabbit, which were very dull, illustrated by the author.
In 1982, Rowling took the entrance exams for Oxford University but was not accepted. Years later, the university would serve as a filming location for the Harry Potter movies. She read for a BA in French and Classics at the University of Exeter. Rowling graduated from Exeter in 1986 and moved to London to work as a researcher and bilingual secretary for Amnesty International. After working at Amnesty International in London, Rowling and her then boyfriend decided to move to Manchester, where she had the idea of the book that would change her life. In December of 1990, the year that Rowling started writing Harry Potter, her mother died after 10 years suffering from multiple sclerosis. An advert in The Guardian led Rowling to move to Porto in Portugal to teach English as a foreign language. She taught at night and began writing in the day. While there, she met the Portuguese television journalist Jorge Arantes in a bar. They married on October 16, 1992, and their child, Jessica, was born on July 27, 1993, in Portugal. They separated on the same year, and Rowling and her daughter moved to Edinburgh, in Scotland, with 3 chapters of Harry Potter in her suitcase. 7 years after graduating from university, Rowling was diagnosed with clinical depression and contemplated suicide. She began a teacher training course in August of 1995 at the Monterey House School of Education at Edinburgh University after completing her first novel while having survived on state benefits. On December 26, 2001, Rowling married Neil Michael Murray. Rowling's and Murray's son, David, was born on March 24, 2003. Rowling's youngest child, daughter Mackenzie, to whom she dedicated Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, was born on January 23, 2005. The family resides in Edinburgh.
It all started on platform 9 3/4. It was 1990. Her then boyfriend and she had decided to move up to Manchester together. After a weekend's flat hunting, she was traveling back to London on her own on a crowded train, and the idea of Harry Potter simply fell into her head. She had been writing almost continuously since the age of 6, but she had never been so excited about an idea before.
And it was the most physical rush of excitement. I'd never felt that excited about anything to do with writing. I'd never had an idea that gave me such a physical response.
To her immense frustration, she didn't have a pen that worked, and she was too shy to ask anybody if she could borrow one. She did not have a functioning pen with her, but she does think that this was probably a good thing. She simply sat and thought for 4 hours, while all the details bubbled up in her brain, and this scrawny, black-haired, bespectacled boy who didn't know he was a wizard became more and more real to her. Perhaps if she had slowed down the ideas to capture them on paper, she might have stifled some of them, although sometimes she does wonder, idly, how much of what she imagined on that journey she had forgotten by the time she actually got her hands on a pen. She began to write Philosopher's Stone that very evening, although those first few pages bear no resemblance to anything in the finishing book. It took her 17 years to finish all the Harry Potter books. Now, let's take a look on each one of them. Known as Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone in some countries, J.K. Rowling's first book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, was released on 26 June 1997. The second title in the series, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, was published on 2 July 1998. It went number 1 in the adult hardback bestseller charts for a month after publication. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban was published on 8 July 1999 to worldwide acclaim. The title spent 4 weeks at number 1 in the UK adult hardback bestseller charts. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the 4th book in the series, was published on 8 July 2000, with a record first print run of 1 million copies in the UK. It quickly broke all records for the greatest number of books sold on the first day of publication in the UK. On 21 June 2003, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix was published in Britain, the US, Canada, and Australia. This 4th installment in the series broke all records that had set by Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, as it became the fastest-selling book in history. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince was published in the UK, US, and other English-speaking countries on 16 July 2005. This, the 6th book in the series, also achieved record sales. Although Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows is a single novel, the 7th installment in Harry's adventure was subsequently the basis for 2 films. As the final book in the series, it was published in the UK, US, and other English-speaking countries on 21 July 2007. Besides writing the 7 Harry Potter books, she also wrote 3 other books related to the Little Wizard's world. After completing the final book in the Harry Potter series, J.K. Rowling wanted to present a special gift to the people who had been most closely associated with Harry. She produced 7 individual copies of a volume of wizarding fairy tales, called The Tales of Beedle the Bard. In December 2007, a copy of The Tales of Beedle the Bard was sold at auction. This was the 7th edition of a handwritten and elaborately finished run of just 7 individual copies of this work. J.K. Rowling has also written 2 smaller volumes. Fans recognize them as they appear in the novels, being the titles of books mentioned in Harry's world, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and The Quidditch Through the Ages. Deciding to change her audience, she wrote 2 adult books. The first one was The Casual Vacancy. It is set in a small community which involves writing characters who are adolescents all the way up to people in their 60s. She loves 19th century novels that center on a town or village. This is her attempt to do a modern version. She says that as a writer, you have to write what you want or what you need to write. She needed to write this book.
For a long time, the novel in my head was called Responsible. That was my working title. Because a central theme, possibly the central theme, is responsibility. How much each of us individually is responsible for where we find ourselves in life, and then how responsible are we for other people's happiness, from your partner or your child, all the way up to society's ills, if you like.
Her second and most recent book is The Cuckoo's Calling. It is a 2013 crime fictional novel published under the pseudonym Robert Galbraith. Before Rowling's identity as the book's author was revealed, 1,500 copies of the printed book had been sold since its release in April 2013, plus another 7,000 copies of the e-book, audiobook and library editions. The book received almost universal critical acclaim, despite not being a huge commercial event.
Some curiosities about J.K. Rowling. Rowling is the first person to become a billionaire US dollars by writing books. The death of Rowling's mother from multiple sclerosis significantly influenced her writing, and death is a major theme throughout the Potter series.
Mum dying was like this depth charge in my life. The pain of her going and just missing such a huge part of her life. She's 45 when she died, which is far too young to die, far too young to leave your family, never knew what we all ended up doing and so on. For Mum, there would have been a particular glory in being a writer because she was the real book lover. And so it does add a little bit of poison to the knife, if you like, that the one thing that I think she really would have prized, she never knew. Perhaps 2 or 3 days after I had the idea for Harry. I disposed of his parents in quite a brutal way. It didn't read in a cruel way, but I mean it was very cut and dried, nothing lingering, no debate about how it had happened, and at that stage, no real discussion of how painful that was going to be. Well, of course, Mum died 6 months after I'd written my first attempt at an opening chapter, and that made an enormous difference because I was living it. I was living what I'd just written. The Mirror of Error said, is absolutely entirely drawn from my own experience of losing a parent. 5 more minutes, just please God, give me 5 more minutes. It would never be enough.
Mom? Dad?
Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows was released on July 21st, 2007, and sold 11 million copies on the first day of its release, breaking Rowling's earliest records for the fastest-selling books of all time. Several publishers rejected the first Harry Potter manuscript, saying it was too long and literary, but Bloomsbury publisher finally accepted it in 1996. The book's publisher suggested Rowling to use the name J.K. rather than her real name Joanne Rowling to appeal to male readers. She took the K from her grandmother's name Kathleen, but neither Kathleen or Kay is part of her legal name. Rowling's series has stimulated children to read and has at the same time boosted the sale of other children's literature such as C.S. Lewis' The Chronicles of Narnia series and Lloyd Alexander's The Black Cauldron series. Harry's birthday is July 31st, 1980. Rowling's birthday is also July 31st, but 1966. She typed her first book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, on a typewriter, often choosing to write in Edinburgh cafes.
I went out and wrote in cafes because the way to make Jessica fall asleep was to keep her moving in the pushchair. So I used to take her out, tire her out, put her in the pushchair, walk her along, the moment she fell asleep, into the nearest cafe and write.
During her childhood, she was always interested in writing fantasy stories.
She used to narrate stories to her younger sister. Her favorite author of all time is Jane Austen. She once said that she has read her book so many times she's lost count. However, we can see the influence in her stories with her deep characters and surprise endings. She has some very famous fans. In fact, before the seventh book was released, she was begged by Stephen King and John Irving not to kill off Harry Potter. Recently, she has been working on a new movie. Warner Bros. Announced on September 12, 2013, that J.K. Rowling would be making her screenwriting debut with Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the first in a new film series which is part of their expanded creative partnership with J.K. Rowling. The films will be inspired by Harry Potter's Hogwarts textbook of the same name and will feature the book's fictitious author, Newton Scamander.